Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on mobile market information systems requirements success. My name is Amol Jadhav from GSMA's mAgri program, and I'm very excited to be here today and see so many folks joining us. Looks like we have about almost 50 or so attending. We have many more registered, so as we get started, I think more and more will be joining. Yeah, so we're working up beyond 50. I'm broadcasting today from Nairobi, and you'll see that our panelists are also spread out between North America, Europe, and Africa. This webinar is a collaborative effort of the GSMA mAgri team, USAID, and FHI 360. This is the organization that runs USAID's FACET program, and we appreciate everybody's support and make this webinar happen today. Also on Twitter, tweeting is encouraged, and we're using the mAgri hashtag today. Next slide, please. Before we get started, let's take a quick look at the agenda and what we have planned for the next hour or so. We'll start out by introducing today's theme, putting it into context, explaining why we're looking at mobile market systems, and sharing some insight from the mAgri team. We'll then get an overview of agricultural market information systems and take a look at some of the ways MIS has impacted farmers. In particular, we'll examine on the impact of MIS activities in Mozambique. Next, we'll start to translate action by presenting some prerequisites. And finally, we'll put all this together by examining a case study of market information system in action from Esoko in Malawi. We want to engage with the audience, so along the way, if you have any queries, please send them our way. It's typing your questions into the questions tab, which you should see on the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. The webinar will be these questions, and at the end, we'll take about 10 or 15 minutes to address those questions. So to present all these agenda items, we're excited to have a panel of mobile MIS experts from around the world, starting with Shawn Zoltner. He's the Director of the Information Technology Applications Department at FHI 360. Again, these are the guys who run the FACET program. For University, we have Andrew Kizito, who is a lecturer at the Department of Statistical Methods and Actuarial Sciences. Next, we'll have Shawn Pairs from Catholic Relief Services, where he is a technical advisor on agriculture and the environment. Finally, Rob Turner is Chief of Party for the Market Linkage Initiatives for ACDI VOCA in Malawi, where they are operating Esoko franchise fee. So thanks to all these guys for taking time to prepare and share their knowledge with us. Next slide. So starting off with the first agenda item, my name, again, is Amol Jadhav, and I'll spend the next 5 minutes or so sharing some of the insights MA has learned on market information systems from our work on the mFarmer initiative. Before doing that, let me give you guys some context on who we are and where our lessons are coming from. Next slide, please. The mFarmer initiative is run by the mAgri program from within the GSM Association for Development, from within the GSM Association Mobile for Development Group, formerly the Development Fund. So it's important to understand our approach to supporting rural smallholder farmers has a strong mobile slant. With funding from USAID, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the mFarmer initiative works to stimulate the development of high-scale and highly impactful mobile value services for poor rural smallholders. And we're doing this by working very closely with 4 mobile operators on developing mobile agricultural value-added services in places like Mali, Kenya, and India. It's from supporting and working closely with these 4 grantees that we have the following insights to share. Next slide. So firstly, we found that mobile market information systems should be part of a holistic bundle of services. With a few exceptions, mobile S can't really succeed as a standalone service. Knowing market prices is only one part of the agricultural puzzle. Farmers need information on a variety of topics like inputs, weather, agricultural practices on crops and livestock. While today's focus is on the market information part of that puzzle, in the future, webinars and knowledge sharing channels will take a look at other components. Cool. Second point, we're a strong advocate of partnership models that reduce the need to reinvent the wheel. There are probably going to be several organizations already providing marketplace in your region. So scratch and building your own market information system will make more sense to partner with others who already have some capacity here. However, before jumping bed with the first nice provider you see, it's important to assess the quality of the information that you're getting. This brings us to the next point of quality assurance. Just like agricultural information needs to be carefully processed before it can add value to farmers, so does market information. This isn't just a simple process. Market prices. We'll examine that process today and take what is needed to generate valuable market information for farmers, not just simple market prices. One of our grantees, the mobile network operator Tigo in Tanzania, is already starting their market and from pilot tests. Firstly, they found that farmers who participated in their pilot requested for the pricing information to be updated at least every 2 to 3 days to stay relevant and useful. Tigo also found that market prices are relevant throughout the agricultural cycle, not just during the harvesting time, which is the typical assumption. Farmers use pricing information in the planting stage, for example, when they're deciding what crop plants, and during the growing stage when they want to plan the personal finances based on what revenue their crops might generate. More information on this pilot can be found in a blog post by colleague Natalia which can be found on the mAgri blog page. Finally, our desk research has shown that measuring the impact of market information systems is challenging. Attributing the prices farmers fetch to the impact of market information they receive is very difficult. So it's not surprising that we see mixed results when it comes to measuring the impact MIS is having on farmers' livelihoods. Again, Andrew Kizito will touch on this later in the webinar when he shares some findings on his research in Mozambique. Finally, as we progress through the mFarmer and continue working with our 4 grantees and learn more about the process, we'll be sure to update you and the mAgri community through blog posts, papers, and other knowledge sharing channels. In fact, in the coming weeks, we're going to release a paper on mobile MIS, so please stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. Moving on to the next agenda item, I invite John Zoltner to give us an overview on agricultural market information systems. Again, John comes to us from FHI 360, and I'll give it to you, John. John, are you with us?
Amol, and thanks for inviting us here today. First of all, a market information system is a set of integrated processes and tools that deliver agricultural market information and other services. And these services that are provided by MIS can vary since they respond to specific needs defined by the communities or the markets they serve. So besides collecting, analyzing, and distributing prices for agricultural products, MIS often include other services such as tools to link traders and support transactions, or additional services such as weather alerts. Next slide, please. MIS are designed to increase market transparency in agriculture. And reducing information asymmetries in this way can help to increase revenues for smallholder farmers by improving their ability to negotiate with buyers, They can lower transaction costs for small-scale traders, and eventually they can lower the cost of goods for consumers. In the end, MIS are designed to improve the competitiveness of markets in agriculture. They also allow governments and regional bodies to track trends in the availability of food so they can create policies or react to shortages in food. Tracking agricultural price information is actually nothing new. The activity of collecting and distributing crop prices in Africa dates back at least to colonial times. The difference is that modern information and communications technologies have transformed what it's possible to do with price and other agricultural information. That transformation began with radio, faxes, and emails, which really accelerated and extended price reporting and gave rise to the first generation of MIS tools. And it was further accelerated by web platforms, which allowed systems to present price data organized over time and allowed for much more sophisticated analysis of what's happening with agricultural prices. Finally, mobile platforms allow for customized data for each recipient and hold the promise of making market information ubiquitous. The first generation of MIS was created in the context of trade liberalization and the withdrawal of governments in Africa from price fixing and from agricultural market activities. It grew out of activities such as the famine early warning systems like USAID's FuseNet, which was founded in 1984. This generation of MIS focused on particular countries or value chains usually, and in general only provided price information, which was obtained from enumerators and sample markets. First generation activities were generally donor dependent and provided for free to all stakeholders. Examples of these systems include OMA in Mali, AMIC in Zambia, and SEMA in Mozambique. The second generation of MIS start to fully leverage the web and mobile technologies that we publish about via USAID's FAST program and on ICT for Ag and Twitter. The second generation led by the private sector or by farmers or traders associations, generally not by government. And in the second generation, we start to see market prices integrated with other relevant information and services, including input price information, agricultural extension advice, weather forecasts, and platforms to link producers with traders. These systems make a much more serious attempt to develop sound business models via links with trade organizations or charging user fees, advertising fees, and through other means. Examples of these second generation tools are Esoko, which we'll hear a little bit about in more detail from Rob later, InfoTrade in Uganda, and Rotten and mFarmer in Kenya. The field of MIS continues to evolve at a very fast pace. We're seeing that distribution of information is getting much more personalized for recipients via mobile. We're seeing new methods of gathering prices with integration of geographic information systems, GIS, to ensure that enumerators are actually in the markets where they're reporting prices from. And also some, for instance, with Lima Links in Zambia, point-of-sale systems that record actual sales prices. Then we're also seeing better integration for trade. Many systems are experimenting with matching traders and producers, and there are some initial attempts to integrate these systems with commodity exchanges. Then finally, there's evolving regional integration of the systems. In West Africa, for a while, we've had GSMA. And then there's a nascent East African network that's organizing called AMOSNet. I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the overview of market information systems. Want to remind the attendees to please send us your question. There's the questions tab that you should find on the right-hand side of the screen on the control panel. Now, from Makerere University in Kampala, we have Andrew Kizito, who will share some findings from their impact study of market information activities on market performance in Mozambique. Andrew?
Yes, thank you very much, Amol. This presentation is about the impact of market information system activities on market performance in Mozambique. And it's a part of a paper we co-authored with Jadhav and John Stars. You can get the link. So, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You've got the next slide, please.
Should be there, Andrew, the second
Hello,
slide on
next,
factors that influence receiving market information.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So on this slide, from this study, we identified the major factors that influence receiving market information to be growing staple crops, whether households own the radio, whether there was a presence of a cell phone network in the village, access to a road with public transport, belonging to farmer associations, access to extension services, the level of education of the households, and also the agroecological zone in which a household belonged or lived. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, from the study, we also looked at the effects of receiving information on market participation and also on prices. And we found out that households that received information increased their probability of market participation by up to 34%. And we also found out that households that received information received an information premium or an information rate of up to 12% per kilogram than of maize sold than households that did not receive any information. And when you look at the aggregated population gain in income by around a 250,000 households that received market information, of course, given that they sold maize, it was up to almost $700,000 US. And if you compare this with the annual operating costs of the market information system in Mozambique, including Northern Province and even the national MIS of around $130,000 US, you could clearly see a cost-benefit ratio of up to 6 times. And therefore, our conclusion was that MIS are socially profitable investment. Next slide, please. So the lessons from the implications for people who like to either set up market information systems or to improve their design. That information on major marketable staples.
It looks like we're having a small problem with the audio. Andrew, we don't hear you. Looks like Andrew might be muted. Is somebody there?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, yeah, now I'm there. Yeah, now I'm there.
Okay, great. Continue, please.
Okay, okay. So another important implication for MIS improvement and design is to make associations and groups important MIS clientele, because these always have contacts with farmers. So if you pass information through this, you can easily get it to the farmers. Then also, it's really good to make government and the NGO extension staff important MIS clientele. And it's nice to focus in areas with highly potential supply response. This means that it's nice to pass over the information to areas which can, for example, grow crops that you want to increase production. Also, if there is a budget and if the resources are there, of course, this is out of the control of the MIS. It's nice to work on feeder roads and also to decentralize the market information systems, and also to invest in universal education so that people can read and understand market information. I would like to thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the insights, Andrew. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions coming in to dig in a bit more into that. Next, we have from Catholic Relief Services, Shawn Pairs, and he's going to share with us best practices, maybe some prerequisites before you jump into the MIS game. Thank you, Shawn.
Thanks very much, Amol. Good morning, everybody. I just want to go through some of the basic issues I think that are relevant to most MISs that are being developed at the moment. As John has said, there's a lot of different types of systems being set up, but I think these are some of the key factors you need to get right in order to really have an impact on the farming community. So, key things. Any system that you set up, I think, has to be really valued and trustworthy by the target audience. It needs to be built to fit the purpose. Clearly, it has to be very client-focused. And if you do set up these sort of things, it's got to be well promoted so that people understand the system and can engage in that process. As the previous speakers have said, I think it's important that you set up systems that can easily scale so that you can get to different parts of a country or a region. You need to be looking at multi-channel approaches. It needs to be a long-term effort, and it also needs to be something that you can constantly upgrade and change so that you're moving with the systems around you. And the final thing is it needs to have a really good business model in order to remain this long-term service. So I just want to go into a little bit of detail into these key aspects. So next slide, please. Okay, this idea of being valued and trustworthy. Any MIS that is being set up has to be accurate. Obvious point, but it has to be accurate in the sense that it's the right types of prices, whether that's wholesale, retail, and different times of the day in certain places. Any information has to be very relevant to the target group. Clearly it has to be timely if it's actionable in commercial terms. It needs to be accessible by the target group, needs to be reliable. And I think it's important to note that most services have failed on virtually all of those aspects. So it takes a long time for services to be able to hit each of those key issues. And I think one of the key points in getting this right is having highly trained, motivated staff. Now, they can be private sector staff or public sector staff, but it's really important that those people understand the role that they're playing and can provide that routine data throughout the system. Next slide. Also, this idea of being built to fit. There, again, as people have said, there are many different types of MISs. I think the one which is most relevant to farmers at this point in the game is the idea of just providing basic market information in terms of spot prices. Now, this is not terribly interesting, but it does provide people with a consistent set of data. Most people at the moment are trying to focus on prices plus, and that means you have to have a lot of different information coming in. In order for you to have an effective market intelligence service, you have to have relevant data for all of the different types of data that you need. So there's many parts to that puzzle, but you've also got to have an audience that understands how to bring that information back together for their particular circumstances. So it's a much more complicated process. The final one is this idea of market linkage, and that really comes down to being able to support brokerage, and that really only takes place when you're linked to something like a commodity exchange which again in most countries is a very nascent type of activity. So if you want to think about this in terms of numbers, I would say that things like market information, you can probably get to 80 or 90% of the farming community and it's understood. When it comes to market intelligence, you're probably looking at the top 5 or 2% of farmers. And when it comes to market brokerage, probably less than 0.1 or 2%. So those are the types of numbers of people that you're getting to with these different types of services. Next slide. When you're doing this type of work, you've also got to be very clear about the type of client that you're working with. And the services will change quite dramatically compared, when you look at smallholder grain crops compared to export farmers or farmers involved with something like high-value horticulture. These different segments need very different types of services. So I think that what you'll see in most cases is that the MISs that we see today are focused on grain crops, stable, storable products that you can maintain a price to. When you're looking at other types of products, the information is much more volatile and it has to be done in a very different way to what you're seeing with the sort of daily and weekly prices that are referred to grain crops. The other thing I think in many countries is that we have to look at language, and the two diagrams that I've shown on this slide just show Uganda with different types of radio stations looking at different language types. There are 33 languages in Uganda, and the radios that we're using, the MIS in that country, we're looking at the main 8 or 9 language areas. So again, customizing the product to the client enables them to use it more effectively. Next slide, please. With any type of activity like this, it's not just a process of getting information onto a platform. You then need to really heavily promote this with your client group. Now you can do this with a series of posters. You can do it with long-term radio spots. If you're using SMS, you're going to have to use a lot of SMS push systems in order to get this onto people's phones. To incentivize them, I think you're going to have to provide some sort of discount offers so that people continue to use that service. In the work that I've done in the past with Andrew Kizito, we used a lot of educational programs on radio, and that was really based a lot on the work that Andrew Shepard did from FAO, which was enabling people to understand when you receive information about market information, how do you actually use that? So that's a really important part of this process. Other things you can do are billboards, radio shows, but again, I think it's important that you link these types of activities to large projects within the country so that you've got an active audience that is working on this, and also link it into key ministries so that you're getting support from the public and the private sector in getting the information to the target audience. Next slide, please. Clearly, scale is a really important part of this process. And if you keep clicking that, please, one of the things that we tried to do in the beginning of this was to set up very localized district-level MISs. Now that was effective but costly. And when it came to the more competitive approach, I think, or the more viable business model, we actually went to a national service. So we combined lots of smaller MISs into a large national service. And I think that was the most successful scale that we actually worked on. When you go to regional levels, you then have to rely on the effectiveness of all of the national services that you're linking into. And it's the weakest link here that really makes or breaks a service. And I think at the moment, the most successful unit of sort of process is this national level MIS. Next slide, please. Just to give you a very quick idea of this multi-channel approach, when you got to farmers, I think a lot of people get their information from neighbors and traders, but it's really the radio and the mobile phone that's going to be important to those people. I think web doesn't work, and a lot of these notice boards don't work for farmers. Local traders, same thing, radio and mobile. When you're looking at wholesalers, then you might find that some of these large electronic billboards outside of markets are effective. When it comes to formal traders, really they're looking at the web. So if you're trying to get to these different sort of partners within the value chain, You've got to be providing this service through multiple different channels. Next slide. Long term. I think it's, with any service like this, you really have to think of this beyond 5 years in order to be successful. So I think it takes a couple of years just to get known in a country. I think it takes 3 years when you start to have progressive farmers and associations using this effectively, 4+ years to get it into a mainstream service, and then it's the sort of 4th and 5th year that you can start to really add on the ideas of more market intelligence. But getting there is really important, and that's not a short-term process. Next slide. Just very quickly, I think it's also, we all know that this is a very fast-moving area, and just quickly to say that anybody in this sort of game needs to be constantly upgrading your technology, but also getting very fast feedback from your different communities to be able to find out which things are working and which things need upgrading. And so any service has to have the ability to reinvest quite quickly when certain things change in your environment. SMS is clearly a very disruptive technology, and people definitely have to have that as part of their arsenal in getting the information out to people. And next slide. I think this is the most difficult area. What is the right business model for an MIS? As John has said, in the past, most MISs were public services, and these can be a very effective low-cost approach if you have a well-maintained and well-managed service. In the past, these have kind of gone out of control due to budgetary reasons, but also on quality sides. So I think there still is a future for public services. The second generation services have really been a mix between NGOs and private sector, so these kind of public-private sector organizations, and a few now are starting to go into the private world. I think at the moment most of these services will be most competitive if they're run as embedded services. There are very few cases yet where we have fully profitable standalone services, and I think it'll take some time before that really happens. And that's the end of my segment. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Shaun. Those are very tangible and specific examples. Hopefully our audience will be able to make good use out of those. So joining us now from Malawi is Rob Turner, Chief of Party from the Market Linkages Initiative at ACDI VOCA. We're all spread across geography, so hopefully Rob's connection is working. You there, Rob? Not yet.
Bear with me. Let me just try and unmute him. Sorry, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, we have people joining from Nairobi, Malawi, Kampala. So sometimes these audio channels can get a bit tricky.
Okay, unfortunately I can't see Rob on the line at the moment, so we'll give him a few minutes to join again. I know he's experiencing power cuts. So why don't we address any questions if there are any right now, and we can come back to Rob once we have him on the line. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't see any questions coming across yet, at least from my view. But I might ask any of the panelists what surprised you guys the most, or from your learnings and from your guys' experience, what do you think, surprised you guys the most, or what challenged your previous assumptions? For example, there's one assumption that we saw that many of the farmers would be, that market prices would be mostly or only relevant during the harvesting time when they want to sell their crops, but then we found in the TIGO pilot that actually the market prices are relevant throughout the entire cycle. Any of the panelists have some insights to share around some things that might have tested or challenged their assumptions or surprised them in studies?
Amol, this is John.
Oh, go ahead, John. Please share.
Yeah. One thing then, when I was running a system called Datagro in Chile using the mobile information platform, we found one of the issues, since we were using SMS text messages, that we always encountered were because a lot of times in the countries we worked in, there were fairly high proportions of people who were illiterate. We weren't sure that text messages would work. But especially with market information, we found that even people who weren't really literate most of the time recognized the name of the written name of the market that they sell in and could read the price information. So when we worked with communities and asked people if they wanted to receive this information, even people who we knew were not literate always wanted to participate. And we found out later it was because they were able to read the specific types of messages, which have a very defined format and are very short. And in some cases because they had grandkids or children reading the messages to them.
Okay, thanks, John. That was also one of my assumptions that got challenged or tested, that when you send market information systems, people need to be literate. But in reality, when it's practiced, you see that there are people who can help them read the price, or you just don't need to know a whole lot of the language to be able to understand that what that price means. So we're going to try to see if Rob's connection is working. Appreciate everybody's patience. So Rob, if you're there, we can welcome you. Otherwise, maybe we'll try another question. So Rob will join when he can in a minute. We have another question. Kind of it's a tricky question, and the question is, how much does it cost to set up a market information service? And when I thought about this, I don't know where to start because I think of a lot of different dynamics. But I think Andrew from Kampala might try to take a stab at that. Andrew, you on? Okay, maybe Andrew might also be having some connection problems in Kampala. There you go. I hear you. Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, the question from one of the attendees was, how much does it cost to run a market information system? It really varies. If you saw, for example, Shawn's slide, generally the costs increase when when it involves a lot of languages, because usually dissemination costs can go up to almost 30% of the budget. But in countries like Kenya and Tanzania, where you can use one language, the costs of dissemination substantially reduce. But also, of course, it depends on the size of the MIS. For example, in Uganda, we had some localized MISs that cost around $30,000 US to run. But yet there were like the national MIS, which could cost up to $70,000 US to run in a year. Some systems in Mali have run for maybe up to 3.5 million for around 4 more years. So really depends on how big you want to be and what's your dissemination strategy. But it really varies. So I hope that helps to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And I think this question about price and budgeting, you throw out some big numbers, and that might, scare off some people, or that might limit the capacity for people to try this out or to offer market information systems as a service. That's part of the reason why we want to advocate this partnership model. If there are already people who have built the capacity and invested in the infrastructure for disseminating market prices or collecting market prices, then it makes sense that you try to partner with them, assess the quality of their market prices, and then see if you can't mitigate the the overhead costs. Looks like Rob might be having a connection now. You with us, Rob?
Yeah.
Third time's a charm? Oh, great. Excited to have you on, Rob. So it looks like you'll be giving us walking us through a case study on your guys' implementation of Esoko.
Yes, yes. Thanks very much. I'm sorry that the technical problems caused you to have to look at my picture for all that time, but I'm here now. So Victoria, you can change the slide. Yeah, I want to briefly just go through what we've done in our public-private partnership between the market linkages and Esoko in Malawi. And to give you a bit of background, we started. Hello?
Please carry on, Rob. Yeah.
We started about a year ago, or about a year and a half ago, in Malawi with USAID funding to develop an MIS for smallholders in Malawi. We purchased the Esoko Web to SMS platform as a sort of off-the-shelf product, which would give us the technology and the methodology for running the MIS, which we felt very important given the time constraints that we had. We started with 13 markets, primarily chosen to represent important production areas in the country, areas that were important for trade and where there was a lot of production and strong markets. And by the end of the year, we were providing market prices to about 4,000 farmers via SMS alerts. The commodities that we chose were primarily staple food crops: maize, rice, soybeans, groundnuts, and various beans, for a couple of reasons. One, because of their importance as food crops, and the project is a food security project. And secondly, because they represent the most traded food crops. And so from a market potential standpoint, they were important as well. Next slide, please. So as I said, we purchased Esoko to provide both the technology and the methodology. And so the methodology that we used was developed by Esoko and provided as a part of their service. It begins with market characterizations, where we go to the markets and look at the measures, the local measures that are used at each market, and calculate convert them to a per kilo price. You can see in the picture some small bowls that are the local measure in the market in that picture. Prices are collected from multiple vendors, a minimum of 5 in every market, and we take the most quoted price is the methodology that we use, rather than an average or median, generally because we find that there's not a great deal of variation in most of these markets. And then prices are uploaded via mobile on market days. So generally this is once a week at most of these markets. And enumerators collect retail, wholesale, and we are moving towards collecting also what we call buying price, which will be the price which a farmer can get if he brings a bag of commodity to the market and sells it to a vendor, rather than what a vendor charges when he's selling it. Next slide, please. So I think one consistent question is, how do you determine, how are you able to verify and be responsible for the accuracy of what you're reporting? And through Esoko, the methodology, the technology that's used is there is an approval screen. So after prices are uploaded, they are available on the web for approval before they're sent out. An administrator here at the office reviews those prices, looks for any changes which are unusual, any outliers, and then we can contact the enumerator if we have any questions, or if we don't get a reasonable answer from the enumerator, we have a third party, a key informant in every market that we can contact to sort of check on things. Typically problems arise. There are enumerators make a mistake on calculation, or they make an uploading error. But occasionally we have instances where it appears that the enumerator has not been to the market, or is guessing, or something like that, and that's when we need to have a key informant to check on that. And the system allows us to verify these things before we send them out. Next slide, please. So at this point, the project is moving from a project-sponsored or a project-run MIS powered by Esoko to an Esoko-owned and managed MIS, and that is, our public-private partnership with them. Currently, the project is not paying any enumeration or management costs. The agricultural commodity exchange here in Lilongwe has taken over the management and the cost of running the enumeration network. We've moved from 13 to 28 markets now in the country, and ACE has added sunflower and sorghum to the commodities that are collected. Just recently, 2 new markets have been added, and they were added based on payment from an NGO that wanted to have price information, local price information for their beneficiaries. And so they've paid ACE a fee to add those markets and collect and distribute prices from those markets. An important aspect, I think, of ACE's role is that this network also serves as a trade facilitation network. So they are generating multiple lines of business from this enumeration network, and from an overhead perspective, from a cost perspective, I think it's important that if you're going to be managing and supporting a costly, network in the country, that there are multiple uses that you can get from that network, and that you can have multiple revenue streams from them as well. Next slide, please. part of the, to explain a bit more of the partners and how we're moving to sustainability. Currently, ACE is collecting, or has a contract with the World Food Program to collect 28 markets. So, so part of their revenue from this is a contract to collect markets or collect prices from these markets. Now, that's the primary reason there's such a large network now of 28 markets. And what we don't know yet is the commercial value of all of these markets. And I think one question is, you know, how many should you start with? You know, what mix of markets is going to be, if looking for commercial sustainability, what mix of markets is going to be attractive to potential subscribers? And we can't really answer that yet. We're just in the process of developing that. But so we don't know if 28 markets will be good, if having a large selection of local markets is going to be attractive to farmers, or if they would be happy just to get prices from, you know, 5 to 10 markets throughout the country. And we'll see that as we commercialize. So currently, ACE is collecting the prices, and Esoko will market the price information to farmers and will revenue share with ACE. Next slide, please. When we chose Esoko, we did it, as we said, to get a complete sort of off-the-shelf package, but also because they have a local business model of franchising country operations and providing both a technology and to be, in effect, a technology and a content provider for partners that that would be interested in MIS. So we've been working with Esoko and with local partners here to develop a reseller network and to develop a sort of commercial infrastructure. Now, you know, I think that commercial sustainability of price information is possible, but there are a lot of constraints, and marketing, I think, is one of the biggest ones. If you have to reach an enormous universe of subscribers paying small amounts in order to make this sustainable, then marketing is absolutely key. And we really feel, like GSMA, that MNOs are natural partners in to leverage their existing networks, to leverage their marketing spending, and frankly, they get a lot of advantages from being able to provide a product which is attractive to rural users. But again, I agree with GSMA that more than prices are probably necessary. That if you're going to get subscribers to pay on a regular basis for information, it needs to be more than simply prices, weather, agricultural tips, bids and offers, these sorts of things. And also, I think it's, from our experience, it's very important what Shawn mentioned, is that marketing is not just about selling the product, but educating users about how to get value from it. And that's something that's obviously very important from our experience. And I think any partner involved in marketing would have to be involved in that activity as well. Next slide, please. So finally, very briefly, I wanted to touch on whether commercial sustainability is the only avenue for this, if potentially governments might be valuable or interested in providing MIS. Many governments are already collecting price information, but usually not in a timely fashion, not the type of information or the accuracy that's necessary for commercial use. There is, however, a widespread recognition of the need for MIS. ASWAPs and the CADEP understands that MIS is important and wants to support it. But their current activities are not really directed at commercial markets, more towards reporting for food security. But I think that there is the case to be made to governments that the cost of providing MIS can be weighed against the costs which are inflicted on economies when market intervention. In particular, I'm thinking of Malawi, which generally sets a minimum price for commodities under the rationale that farmers don't know the correct market price and are therefore taken advantage of. And if the government were to provide MIS, a useful MIS, rather than intervening in the market to set prices, that would in the end be a much more economical activity. So yeah, thanks very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Amol, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can
on the
now.
topic of MIS, great. For those of you not aware, there's an upcoming conference in Addis between the 6th and 9th of November called Making the Connection, Value Chains for Transforming Smallholder Agriculture. Both Victoria Claus from GSMA, you might have heard her voice pop in and out. She and Shawn Pairs from Catholic Relief Services will be joining the panel session, Mobile Services and Value Chains. So if you're going, it might be a great opportunity to network with them or with other people, of course. And if you are interested, please register. Now we are running out of time, but we want to try to fit in 2 more questions. First question is to Andrew, and if you could please keep your answer brief and to the point. Question for Andrew is if you could share some good examples of how some people are using the feedback mechanism from users to improve their mobile MIS. Andrew.
Oh, thanks. I thought the question was about feedback.
Yes. Can you give examples about how people have used feedback?
Yeah. Well, the feedback is not necessarily through mobile phones, but some of the MISs that have used different feedback mechanisms, they include user assessments or need surveys. Some use customer satisfaction surveys. Then they also get feedback from meetings with users, such as farmers and feeder groups. Then if you're using mobile phones, normally you can get feedback through the usage of SMS downloads and websites. And some MISs, they have external evaluations by donors, governments, and third parties. Then some MISs use listenership groups. And then very few MISs have suggestion boxes, and then also reviews from their regulators. And I know of one in Ethiopia which has a customer service center hotline. So those are the main ones I could talk about. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. There's another question about the role of mobile service operators or mobile network operators, specifically how to integrate multiple mobile phone operators or phone companies into a single or consistent MIS. And I think this question we'll call on Shawn Pairs to give an answer to. Shawn, are you with us? While Shawn is jumping on, I'll touch on the role. Great. Go ahead, Shawn.
Yeah, thanks. I think the answer to this question really comes through a lot of what the last speaker was saying. If you have a backbone service in a country, you can start to add lots of people into that service. And as Rob was saying, he's got different NGOs coming into the Esoko platform in the same way that you can use different service providers on mobile phones doing the same thing. So in Uganda, there was a situation where I think there were 3 mobile phone companies providing information. They all took their information off one platform, and that provided a consistent price throughout the country. And I think it's that kind of integration which is going to be important in the future. So I think that what Rob has been saying about, if a country can set up a single backbone information, you can add a lot of things to that, and you can bring more parties to play in that space. And I think that's really the attractive idea of having something like Esoko, is that is the backbone that you hang other suppliers onto.
Yeah, that makes me think of also the role of the phone company, of the network operator. And when I look at the different partners needed, what I tend to see is that there's the phone company or the network operator that has the connection with the farmers, but then you need these other value-added services on top of that to actually design the services. If it's a network like Esoko or developers that create some kind of custom application for buyer-seller matchmaking or different interfaces for different types of phones.
Exactly, but what you don't want to be having is if there are 7 different companies working mobile phones within a country and they all have different prices because they all have different systems, that would be a very problematic situation. I think it's when those companies come together to source information from one trusted area, or they can actually, there are some cases where you can get them to provide 2 or 3 prices, but each of them show where those sources of information are coming from so that the client can then decide which one they trust most.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Shawn, for that. Before we wrap up, I'm told to mention 2 things. Firstly, we have recorded this webinar, so we'll be posting it online for your colleagues that maybe couldn't make it, or if you missed some things and we're taking notes, you could, in the next day or 2, we'll post it online, and I think you all will receive a link to that. Also, stay up to date on future knowledge sharing resources and activities. Please join our distribution list. You can see the link right there. Special thanks to all of our attendees. Thank you to the audience for bearing with us through our technical challenges, working with geographic logistical challenges. Great, so hope to see you on a future webinar. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And thank you for joining. Bye-bye.